For 17 years, I thought laughing at my wife's jokes about me was what good husbands do. Then she made one too many at the company dinner, and her laughter died the second I stood up and walked away. What I discovered next about her late-night texts changed everything. My name is Arthur Croft. I'm 47 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've been selling industrial equipment to manufacturing plants across 3 states. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps food on the table for my family. At least it used to be enough. The night everything changed started like any other corporate function. Alara, my wife of 18 years, had insisted we attend the quarterly sales meeting dinner. She always enjoyed these events more than I did. Said it was important for my career to network and schmooze. What she really meant was it gave her a fresh audience. The banquet hall buzzed with conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. I had just finished explaining to Hans from accounting about the new hydraulic press contracts when Alara's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. "Oh, you want to hear something hilarious?" Alara announced to the table of 8, her eyes sparkling with that familiar gleam I'd learned to dread. "Arthur here tried to impress a client last week by demonstrating one of his machines. Well, let's just say he forgot to check if it was plugged in first." The laughter erupted around the table. Hans nearly choked on his wine. The district manager's wife covered her mouth, trying to contain her giggles. Even my direct supervisor, Lars, was shaking his head with amusement. The client just stood there watching Arthur push buttons for 5 minutes. Alara continued, building momentum like a comedian working the crowd. Finally, this 20-something intern walked over and pointed to the outlet. Arthur's face went redder than a fire truck. More laughter, louder this time. I felt a familiar heat rising in my cheeks. That burning sensation of embarrassment mixed with something deeper, something that had been building for months, years maybe. The best part, Alara pressed on, clearly enjoying herself, is that Arthur calls himself an equipment specialist, 17 years in the business, and he can't remember to plug things in. That last comment hit differently, not because it was crueler than the others, but because of how casually she delivered it. Like I wasn't sitting right there, like I was just a character in her story, not her husband, not the father of her child. I looked around the table. Everyone was still chuckling, stealing glances at me, waiting for my usual self-deprecating response. The one where I'd laugh along and maybe add my own embarrassing detail to keep the crowd entertained. That's what I'd always done before, but not tonight. I set down my fork. The metal made a soft clink against the ceramic plate, barely audible over the dying laughter. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the polished floor. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. Her laughter died the second I stood up. The table went quiet. 8 pairs of eyes followed me as I straightened my jacket and pulled my phone from my pocket. No dramatic speeches, no angry outbursts, no scenes. I simply looked at Alara, saw the confusion flickering across her face, and walked toward the exit. "Arthur," she called after me, her voice missing its earlier confidence. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking past the other tables, past the servers carrying trays of dessert, past the bar where Lars would probably buy everyone around to fill the awkward silence I'd left behind. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped into the parking lot. For the first time in hours, I could breathe properly. I sat in my truck outside the banquet hall for 20 minutes, engine off, watching other couples stream toward the entrance. Happy couples. Couples who probably didn't use each other as ammunition for cheap laughs. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was hiding in a parking lot at 47. Like some teenager avoiding his problems. My phone buzzed. 3 texts from Alara. "Where did you go? Everyone's asking about you. This is embarrassing." I almost laughed. She was embarrassed. After 17 years of marriage, after turning me into her personal court jester, she was worried about being embarrassed. I started the truck and drove home. Our house sat dark except for the porch light that had been flickering for 2 weeks. I'd offered to fix it twice. Alara had said not to bother, that it wasn't that serious. Nothing I did was ever serious enough to warrant her attention. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the family photos lining the hallway. There we were at Felix's high school graduation last spring. Alara beaming, me standing slightly apart like I was photobombing my own family pictures. That's when it hit me. This wasn't new. The public humiliation, the casual dismissal, the way she spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. It had been building for years, so gradually I hadn't noticed. Or maybe I'd chosen not to notice. I remembered Felix's 16th birthday party. Alara had told everyone about how I tried to assemble his gaming chair and ended up with extra screws and a wobbly seat. Big laughs all around. I joined in, added my own self-deprecating comments. Anything to keep the peace. Or the time of my company picnic when she'd regaled my coworkers with the story of my food poisoning incident in Mexico. Every embarrassing detail delivered with perfect comedic timing while I stood there red-faced, waiting for it to end. The bourbon burned going down, but it was nothing compared to the burning realization that I'd been complicit in my own destruction. Every time I'd laughed along, I'd given her permission. Every time I'd stayed quiet, I'd encouraged her. My phone buzzed again. Alara was calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not work emails or project reports. I started writing down every incident I could remember. Every joke at my expense, every public humiliation, every time she'd made me feel small. The list was longer than I'd expected. By the time I heard her car in the driveway, I had 3 pages and a crystal clear understanding of what my marriage had become. She wasn't my partner. She was my heckler, and I'd been her willing straight man for far too long. The front door slammed. Alara's heels clicked against the hardwood as she made her way to the kitchen. Arthur, what the hell was that about? I closed the laptop and looked at her. Really looked at her. She stood in the doorway, purse clutched in one hand, car keys in the other, waiting for an explanation she felt entitled to receive. For the first time in years, I didn't rush to give her one. I asked you a question, Arthur, Alara said, her voice sharp with irritation. What was that performance about? I looked at her standing there, still in her cocktail dress, still playing the role of the wronged wife. 3 months ago, I might have apologized. 6 months ago, I definitely would have. Performance, I repeated. That's an interesting choice of words coming from you. She shifted uncomfortably. Don't be dramatic. You walked out of a business dinner like some kind of child. I walked out because I got tired of being your opening act, I said. How long have you been using me as material, Alara? Because I just spent the last hour making a list, and it goes back years. Her face flushed. That's ridiculous. I was just sharing a funny story about my work failures to my colleagues, people I have to face every Monday morning. I stood up, noting how she took a small step back. Tell me what exactly was funny about me struggling with that equipment demonstration. It wasn't. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it then? For the first time in recent memory, Alara didn't have a quick comeback. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I was just making conversation. No, I said, moving toward the kitchen window. You were making yourself look witty at my expense. There's a difference. She followed me, her heels clicking on the tiles. Since when do you analyze everything I say? We used to laugh together about these things. We used to laugh together about a lot of things, I replied. Before you decided I was more useful as a punchline than a partner. The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could see the neighbor's house, their windows glowing warm and yellow. A normal family, probably having normal conversations that didn't involve dissecting each other for entertainment. Arthur, you're overreacting, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, because I've been thinking about other ways you've undermined me. Remember that tech stock investment I wanted to make last year? The one you called my midlife crisis gambling phase? Her expression shifted. She knew where this was going. That stock's up 40%, Alara. 40%. But you convinced me it was too risky, that I didn't understand the market. I turned the phone toward her. Turns out I understood it better than you thought. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening slightly. So, here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm going to start making my own financial decisions, and I'm going to stop being the comic relief at social functions. Think you can manage that? She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was smaller, less certain. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, I said. The question is whether you care enough to stop. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. Not because we had some dramatic fight that ended with slammed doors, but because I chose to sleep there. It felt like a statement, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was trying to say. Alara was already up, making coffee with more noise than necessary. The passive-aggressive breakfast routine I knew. "Good morning," I said, stretching the kink out of my neck. She didn't respond immediately, just poured her coffee and added cream with exaggerated precision. "Felix called last night," she finally said after you fell asleep. "He wanted to know if everything was okay. Our son away at college, checking in on his parents." The kid had always been perceptive. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That his father was going through something." She turned to face me, coffee mug held like a shield. "Is that what this is, Arthur? Some kind of midlife crisis?" I almost laughed. There was again the casual dismissal. Any behavior she didn't understand got labeled as a crisis or phase. "No, Alara. This is me finally paying attention to what's been happening in our marriage." She set down her mug harder than necessary. "And what exactly has been happening?" "You've been treating me like an employee you're not particularly fond of," I said. "Someone whose mistakes make good water cooler gossip." "That's not true, isn't it?" I pulled out my laptop and opened the document I'd started last night. March 15th, company picnic. "You told everyone about my food poisoning incident in Mexico. Every detail, including the part about me crying in the hotel bathroom." Her face went pale. May 22nd, Felix's graduation party. "The story about me assembling his gaming chair wrong. You got 3 encores on that one." "Arthur, stop." July 4th, the neighborhood barbecue. "You told everyone I was afraid of the neighbor's chihuahua because it bit my ankle once." "Those were just funny stories," she said weakly. "To who?" "Because they weren't funny to me." I closed the laptop. "They were humiliating. And you knew it." She stood there for a long moment, coffee growing cold in her hands. "So, what do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to decide if you want to be married to me, or if you want to keep using me as your personal comedy show," I said. "Because you can't have both." The kitchen fell quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of morning traffic. "I need time to think," she said. "Take all the time you need," I replied. "I'll be here when you decide." But even as I said it, I wondered if that was still true. 3 days later, I was reviewing quarterly sales reports when my phone rang. The number looked familiar, but I couldn't place it until I heard a voice. "Arthur, this is Isabel Moreau." Isabel, my college girlfriend, the woman I dated for 2 years before we both graduated and went our separate ways. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade. "Isabel," I said, leaning back in my office chair. "This is unexpected. How are you?" "I'm good," she said, though there was something tentative in her voice. "I'm actually back in town. Just moved here for work. Regional Marketing Director for Schmidt & Sons Engineering." Schmidt & Sons Engineering was one of my biggest clients. Small world. "That's great," I said. "Congratulations on the position." "Thank you. Listen, I know this might sound strange, but I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee sometime, catch up. I know it's been years, but..." She trailed off, and I found myself wondering what had prompted her to reach out. We parted on good terms back in college, but 23 years was a long time. "I'd like that," I heard myself saying. "There's a place called Café Le Rêve downtown. Tomorrow at 2. "Perfect. I'll see you then." After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone. What were the odds? Isabel calling just as my marriage was imploding. Part of me felt guilty for agreeing to meet her, but a larger part was curious. What would it be like to talk to someone who remembered the man I used to be? That evening, I mentioned the coffee meeting to Alara over dinner. Her reaction was immediate and predictable. "You're meeting your ex-girlfriend for coffee," she said, her fork hovering midway to her mouth. "Don't you think that's inappropriate?" "It's coffee, Alara. Non-affair." "Still," she said, setting down her fork. "Given everything that's been happening between us, the timing seems suspect." I looked at her across our dining room table, this woman I'd been married to for 18 years, and realized I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no defensiveness, no desire to reassure her, just emptiness. "You're right," I said. "The timing is interesting, but then again, So was your timing last night. She frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I saw you texting someone at 11 p.m. someone named Etienne. Must be pretty important business to discuss that late. Her face went pale. That was work-related. Was it? Because I checked your phone records, Alara. Etienne from your office has been calling and texting you quite a bit lately. Sometimes at very interesting hours. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since this whole mess started, she looked genuinely rattled. Arthur, it's not what you think. I don't know what to think anymore, I said, standing up from the table. But I'm having coffee with Isabel tomorrow at 2. You can think whatever you want about that. I left her sitting there staring at her half-finished dinner, probably trying to figure out how much I actually knew about Etienne. The truth was I didn't know much yet, but I was learning that sometimes the thread of knowledge was just as powerful as knowledge itself. For the first time in weeks, I slept well that night. Café Le Rêve was busy for a Tuesday afternoon, filled with business people grabbing quick meetings and college students nursing lattes over textbooks. I spotted Isabel immediately. She was sitting by the window, looking remarkably similar to how I remembered her, just with shorter hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Arthur, she said, standing to give me a brief hug. You look good. Success suits you. I wasn't sure success was the right word for where I found myself, but I appreciated the sentiment. We ordered coffee and found a quiet corner table. For a few minutes, we exchanged the usual small talk, her job, the move, how much the town had changed, but eventually she got to what I suspected was the real reason for her call. I heard. About your parents, she said gently. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was always kind to me. My father had died 8 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and devastating. I'd barely had time to process the grief before Alara started using it as material for her stories about my emotional breakdown. Thank you, I said. He would have remembered you fondly. How are you handling it? The question caught me off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because no one had asked me that in months. Not Alara, not my coworkers, not even Felix. Everyone just assumed I was fine because I kept going to work, kept paying the bills, kept showing up. Some days are harder than others, I admitted. He and I were working through some things when he died. Stuff we never got to resolve. Isabel nodded. That's the hardest part, the unfinished conversations. Yeah. I took a sip of my coffee, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. Can I ask you something? What made you call me after all these years? She was quiet for a moment, stirring her latte thoughtfully. Honestly, I've been divorced for 3 years. Messy split. And I've been thinking a lot about the relationships that actually mattered. The ones where I felt like I could be myself. She looked up at me. You were one of those people, Arthur. You saw me for who I really was, not who you wanted me to be. I remember feeling the same way about you, I said. Do you still feel that way? I mean, like people see the real you? The question hung in the air between us. It was such a simple question, but it cut right to the heart of everything I'd been struggling with. No, I said finally. I don't think I have in a very long time. What happened? I thought about how to answer that. About Alara's jokes and Etienne's late-night texts, and the way I'd slowly disappeared into the background of my own life. I think I forgot who I was, I said. Started letting other people define me instead. Isabel reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. The Arthur I remember was confident, funny, ambitious. He had opinions and wasn't afraid to share them. He made me feel interesting just by being interested in what I had to say. That guy feels like a stranger now, I admitted. Maybe, she said. Or maybe he just needs someone to remind him he's still in there. When I left the coffee shop an hour later, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope. Not for a relationship with Isabel necessarily, but for the possibility that the man I used to be wasn't completely lost. Maybe it was time to go looking for him. I hired a private investigator on Thursday. Inspector Rossi was a former cop who got straight to the point. Most people already know what I'm going to find, he told me in his downtown office. They just need proof. I gave him Etienne's information. He promised answers within a week. That afternoon, I called Isabel. I was hoping I'd hear from you, she said. How are you feeling after our coffee? Like I remembered something I'd forgotten. Would you like to have dinner? Nothing romantic, I added quickly. I just need to talk to someone who remembers who I used to be. Arthur, are you separated from your wife? Not officially, but we're not in a good place. She paused. I'd like dinner with you, but I need you to understand. I'm not looking to be anyone's escape route from a bad marriage. I've been down that road. I'm not looking for an escape. I'm looking for perspective. Okay, but let's be clear about boundaries. I'm happy to be your friend, someone you can talk to, but until you figure out your marriage situation, that's all this can be. I respected her honesty. We made plans for Saturday night. When I got home, Alara was waiting with wine and a forced smile. How was work? She asked too brightly. Fine. How was yours? Same old corporate nonsense. Etienne sends his regards, by the way. The casual way she dropped his name was clearly a test. I kept my expression neutral. That's nice of him. She looked disappointed by my lack of reaction. Arthur, I think we should talk about what's happening between us. I agree, but not tonight. I'm tired. When then? I looked at her, this woman I'd shared 18 years with, and felt only sadness. Not anger, not betrayal, just deep, weary sadness for what we'd lost. Soon, when I'm ready. That night, I lay in bed while Alara pretended to sleep beside me. I could tell she was awake, probably waiting for me to bring up Etienne or start a fight that would clear the air, but I wasn't ready for that fight yet. I wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with first. The next morning, Alara left early without saying goodbye. She'd never done that before. The silence felt final somehow. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. Looking forward to dinner tomorrow. Fair warning, I'm excellent at giving unsolicited advice. For the first time in days, I smiled. Isabel chose a small Italian place on the outskirts of town. Family-owned, comfortable, unpretentious, exactly the kind of place Alara would have dismissed as not upscale enough. This is perfect, I told Isabel as we settled into a corner booth. It reminds me of Luigi's from college. Remember? I did. Our spot junior year where we'd split pizza and talk for hours about dreams and theories about life. Back when I still had theories about life. You know what I remember about you from college? Isabel said after we'd ordered. You were always planning something, some new business idea, some adventure. You had this energy, like you couldn't wait to see what came next. That guy seems like a stranger now. What happened to him? He got trained out of me, slowly, over years. Every time I'd suggest something new, it got shot down. Eventually, I stopped suggesting anything. By Alara, by work, by life. I learned it was easier to go along than fight for what I wanted. Isabel leaned forward. What do you want, Arthur? Right now, if you could have anything. When was the last time someone had asked me that? I want to remember what it feels like to be heard. To share an idea and have someone get excited instead of finding reasons why it won't work. Like the tech stock investment. Exactly. I'd done the research, believed in the product, but instead of supporting my decision, she made me feel stupid for considering it. My phone buzzed. Inspector Rossi. Need to meet tomorrow. Important information. My stomach tightened. Whatever he'd found was significant. Isabel noticed my expression. Everything okay? I might find out tomorrow. Arthur, she said gently, can I give you that unsolicited advice I promised? Please, whatever you discover about your marriage, make sure you're making decisions for the right reasons. Don't stay because you're afraid to leave. Don't leave because you're angry. Make choices based on who you want to be, not who you've been convinced you are. I looked at this woman who'd known me when I still knew myself and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, clarity. Thank you for reminding me that version of myself still exists. He never left. He just got buried under other people's expectations. When I dropped her off, she paused before getting out. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember you deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who builds you up instead of tearing you down. After she went inside, I sat thinking about deserving happiness, about being built up instead of torn down. It was a radical concept after years of being convinced I was lucky anyone put up with me at all. Tomorrow I would learn the truth about Etienne and Alara. Tonight, I was going to sleep better than I had in months. Inspector Rossi called Friday morning. We need to meet. I have information you're going to want to see. His office felt smaller this time, cramped with the weight of what I was about to learn. He slid a manila folder across his desk. Your instincts were right, he said. Etienne Hartwell, 39, divorced, Works in marketing at Alera's company. They've been having an affair for 4 months. I opened the folder. Photos of them entering a hotel downtown. Restaurant receipts. Phone records showing calls and texts at all hours. Everything documented with clinical precision. The hotel visits happen twice a week, usually during lunch. Inspector Rossi continued. Always the same place, always the same time. They're not being particularly careful about it. I stared at a photo of them kissing in the hotel parking lot. Alera looked happier than I'd seen her in years. There's more, Inspector Rossi said. Financial records show she's been using your joint credit card for these meetings, hotels, dinners, even gifts. The betrayal was complete. Not just emotional, but financial. She'd been funding her affair with our money while making me feel like a failure for wanting to make a simple investment. I'm sorry, Arthur. I know this isn't easy to hear. I closed the folder. Actually, it is easy. Now I know exactly where I stand. That afternoon, I called Isabel. How are you holding up? She asked. Better than expected. I have proof now. No more wondering. No more second-guessing myself. What's your next step? Lawyer first. Then I'll tell Felix. He deserves to hear it from me before things get messy. And Alera? I looked out my office window at the parking lot where I'd sat that night after the corporate dinner, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I'll confront her tonight. But Isabel, I want you to know something. Whatever happens with my marriage, these conversations with you have reminded me of who I used to be. That means more than you know. The Arthur I knew is still there, she said softly. He just needed permission to come back. When I got home, Alera was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up with that same forced smile she'd been wearing all week. How was your day? She asked. I set the folder on the kitchen counter. Enlightening. Her smile faltered when she saw the manila folder. What's that? For months, Alera. For months with Etienne. Hotel receipts, photographs, phone records, all paid for with our joint account. The color drained from her face. She gripped the counter behind her. Arthur, I can explain, no need. It's all very clear. I opened the folder and spread several photos on the counter. You look happy in these. Happier than you've looked with me in years. She stared at the evidence of her betrayal, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The interesting thing is, I continued, I'm not even angry. I'm relieved, because now I understand why you needed to tear me down. Guilt makes people do cruel things. It wasn't like that, she whispered. Wasn't it? You made me feel like a failure while you were having the time of your life with another man. You used my struggles, my grief over my father's death, even my work mistakes, as entertainment while you were betraying everything we built together. Tears started running down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did hurt me, systematically, for months. And now I know why. I gathered up the photos and put them back in the folder. I've already contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from him next week. 6 months later, I was living in a downtown condo with a view of the river and sleeping better than I had in years. The divorce was final, clean, and surprisingly amicable once Alera realized I had documented proof of everything. Felix had taken the news hard, but understood. I could see you weren't happy, Dad. He told me over coffee during one of our weekly visits. I didn't know why. The settlement was fair. Alera kept the house. I kept my retirement accounts and the freedom to make my own financial decisions. That tech stock I'd wanted to invest in was now up 60%. I'd also made some other investments in myself. You look different, Isabel said, meeting me for lunch at Café Le Rêve, our usual spot. We've been having these friendly lunches for months now. Nothing romantic, just two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Different how? Confident. Like the Arthur from college, but with 25 years more wisdom. She was right. I felt like myself again. I'd started taking evening classes in business management, something I'd always wanted to do. I joined a hiking club and rediscovered my love of being outdoors. I'd even started writing in a journal, something Isabel had suggested. I have news, I told her. I'm starting my own equipment sales company. Going independent. Her face lit up. Arthur, that's fantastic. Are you nervous? Terrified, I admitted. But also excited. For the first time in years, I'm excited about what comes next. The Arthur I remember was always an entrepreneur at heart. You just needed to remember that about yourself. After lunch, I drove past my old house. Alara's car was in the driveway next to one I didn't recognize. A red convertible. Etienne's, probably. I felt nothing but mild curiosity about whether she was happy. My phone buzzed. A text from Felix. Proud of you, Dad. Can't wait to see your new office. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and my laptop, updating my business plan. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear music from a riverside restaurant. Life moving forward. My phone rang. Isabel. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said. Never. What's up? I was just thinking about something you said at lunch, about being excited for what comes next. Yeah. I realized I feel the same way. For the first time since my divorce, I'm excited about the future too. I smiled, looking out over the water. Maybe that's what happens when you finally stop letting other people write your story. Maybe. So, she agreed. Arthur. Yes. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow night? Not as friends catching up, but as something more. I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago, afraid to make his own investment decisions, afraid to stand up for himself, afraid to imagine a future different from the past. I'd love that, I said. I really would. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my new life, listening to the sounds of the city below. Tomorrow, I'd meet with my first potential client as an independent businessman. Tomorrow night, I'd have dinner with a woman who saw me as I truly was. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what came next.